A really good story, Blake, and beautifully presented in those drawings as well. I really enjoyed the life that you told of the building, the effect of time, the way that people were doing things, and that's what animated the space. And the architecture, the shape, the form, the shape and form just
secondary,
just sits back. So there's some real qualities, I think, to the way that you're developing the scheme, but also in terms of your thinking about what can happen and how it might happen. And I think it's really, really lovely, very, very poetic scheme. Richard Peterbridge.
Is this Blake?
Yeah. It is Blake.
Because we don't have a sheet for Blake.
Oh.
We've got James.
Oh, I have too. Oh, anyway. Well,
anyway,
make that
I don't want to call you by the wrong name.
That's good.
The idea of slow architecture is very much brought out in the scheme. The idea that something can change over time and can be occupied in many ways, and it's very evocative, I think, of trying, and also you present it in such a way that we could almost imagine being there. So, were you tempted to do three-dimensional drawings at all at any point to kind of show what was happening, or because it ends up being as if one was seeing a scene, which is okay. I was just curious.
I was certainly tempted, but I just wasn't sure how to implement it in a more successful way than what I have done. I thought it.
Well, it's just that the things that would come with that would be getting a sense of the substance. Like the model gives more away. You're getting a sense of the material, but also when you include something like a soft thing, like a screen that can fold away. I started thinking, well, I wonder how you would make windows there. Where you would put, the normal furniture, like how would you make an architrave? I started thinking about you've added a lot of things that are metal, and you've got existing buildings. So I just started, I was thinking, I wonder how we would make windows. Would that have the same consideration about the morning light as it comes across and is reflected across the other side of the room? Because that's the thing that we need to be able to do, that kind of thing that we're trying. But you do wonder how you can do that with all of the elements that we have, everyday elements that we have.
I feel like that scale of work for this project would be super collaborative with the users, and so kind of is less well represented here.
Well, you can do it with the users.
That's quite prescriptive.
Yeah, you can do it with the users, and I think that's often a lovely way to do it.
Yeah.
But one of the things that you can do when you've got insights that you have, and imagination that you have, that people come to you for, something like, I remember seeing this thing in Japan where the water had been placed in a bowl, where you come in and you would put your eyes down to look at the water, but you would also look up to an aperture somewhere. And the user may not even see that as something to do. But I'm thinking this is where you're suggesting that you're paying a lot of attention to where the eyes are, where the legs are, the hands are, and as you move around, what it is you can do to set in train the everyday in some delightful manner. And that's something that we all have to do. That's a really magic thing that architecture can do. So there's a lot here suggestive of that, and also some of it is actually born out in your elevations of imagined life of it. But you can also do it in the next renovation that you do.
Yeah.
How can I bring some of this in? But register the life that changes during the day, winter, and is different in summer. So I think it's a really important thing to keep your eye on, because you have those opportunities in every project. Yeah, nice to see.
interesting. The whole fact that the council's going to, or whoever's responsible, is going to pull the railway out. I mean, there's something to be argued and fought about one way or another. You know, you can make cases for both, but to take all the people straight down to the beaches, all the way through the town, it can go slowly. It's the last remaining railway that goes through a town. Townsville was the one that I can remember before. Anyway, they are going to. But so what's going to happen is that this whole zone that runs through is going to suddenly become this long public room, hopefully, right? That they don't sell it off to developers. So what I like so much about the thinking is that in this long public room, there'll be points and punctuations along it of public houses. You know, the word pub means a public house. And that's what you're turning it into, a public house that involves theatre and many other possibilities. And so the whole issue of time from early morning to night is a nicely seen thing through you, by you. And I keep thinking to myself, would you just leave it like this? Are you going to put a moving roof over it or not? Or did you?
Yeah.
Because you didn't discuss that.
So the way it's intended to function is that this is actually one of the existing ones.
Yeah.
But you would add another one a little bit further along.
Yeah.
And this guy
Yeah.
gets up onto this platform, and there would be a piece coming down there.
Right.
He moves the wheel. Is there a pointer? I guess I can. He moves this wheel, which moves the cable, which moves this wheel, which moves this axle, which winds up this.
Yeah, you mentioned that, but what I didn't mention was that it actually moves the roof. Or if you did mention it, I didn't pick it up.
Yeah, so
It's a
it pulls it.
It's a screen that pulls across, but that's not a roof.
Up at the top there's a...
Oh,
That's the.
Okay.
Oh, you're focusing on
As
the.
well.
okay.
Yeah.
Right, now I can see it. Yeah.
So that is a roof coming across.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Now, I couldn't quite understand that. So I think that's a really important issue, because when I saw it like that, I thought, what it really needs is actually a complete fly roof over the whole thing that lets the light through in different patterns and so forth, has opening parts to it.
That's exactly what it's got.
Right, yeah, but it'll have to go.
That sounds like the
it'll
one
have to go. It'll have to oversail more, right, for it to work properly.
Yeah.
So,
Do you mean just be more vast?
no, it's got to oversail the sides.
Oh yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Otherwise, you'll have the slanting rain and the southerly coming and pissing straight in there on the performance.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's okay. But what I like about it is your sense for publicness and the need for public houses and public housing in a very broad sort of way. You know, you mentioned a whole lot of functions, and that's the way this whole system could operate. It would have been wonderful to have seen a beautiful drawing. You showed it in the beginning where the railway line runs, but you could have shown maybe on that other places where other things could work, so you could get a picture of this whole wonderful sort of necklace that connects Newcastle from west to east.
From the very start, I kind of intended that maybe I'll get to that point, but I wanted to make sure that I got the station right first.
But I find it quite thought-provoking, and I find that
as a framework for
publicly you have public interest at heart, which is really good.
There's a lovely slow cooked humility to your scheme, which I think is fantastic. It's a very generous scheme in that sense. In 1990 I went to Durban in South Africa, and down on the waterfront there was a series of little huts and developments and tarpaulins and all sorts of stuff that people were living in. And there were old boats pulled up on the shore on the mud flats, and there were people getting crabs out of the mangroves, and the place was really alive. And it was really alive with this sort of small-scale development, you know, be it as humble as it was there on the waterfront of Durban. I went back 2 years ago, and it had been developed by developers, and there was no life at all. it was completely opposite.
Towers.
So this sort of stuff is really important. The sort of tactile, micro-scale, honest living, truthful stuff is really important stuff. And I really like the way you've developed it in a very honest way, matter-of-fact way. In a funny way, it's, puts architecture second and people first, which is a very
at times I wondered if someone would say, but where's the architecture?
No, but it's not one or the other.
Yeah.
It's how to treat the person to the magic of architecture.
Yeah.
And it's not always about form. It's just where to put your elbows on a window.
That's what Pip was saying.
That's what I'm
beginning.
saying. It's the relationship that you have with architecture. So it's not one of being overall.
So I wouldn't be worried about that at all. But I'd be thinking about what is the next step where the light comes and what you put your hand on and what material is that.
Yeah.
But one comment about that is you talked about bathing, you talked about fire, you talked about acting. They're primaries. They're like, they're not secondaries, they're primary elements. And I personally think they could have taken much bigger studies than what you gave them. And that these other things sort of sit back and look at those elemental, archaic places. The tree, sitting under the tree in the shade, teaching, for instance. It's, it's like a little village. And it's in many ways what we need to revisit and think about, scale-wise, socially-wise, acceptance-wise, performance, free performance, all that sort of stuff. So I think it's a very intelligent and humble way of looking at how you might develop those stations, those resources.
Yeah, look, great work, Blake. Another project in which you struggle through it, but you always had this intuitive sense about what you wanted it to be in terms of its contents. And so here's another project that, you start doing it. December 26th, the next day, you've got some context to do it for real. I think this should be put in front of council as an idea about, hey, let's do something in the interim, and where the interim then takes over. You stumbled in your presentation because you had to say this bit where the architect doesn't do architecture, and that's not something that architects are comfortable with.
They do architecture. Then you get used to it.
They do, but we're not used to this idea of ceding responsibility, giving away responsibility, and I think this project is about acknowledging the idea that everyone who uses this project is as responsible as the architect in the making of it. And that's the beautiful thing. It posits architecture as a kind of porous idea instead of an exclusionary membrane between public and private property. And so to me, that's the absolute magic of it, that we can actually see the possibilities that happen, irregardless of the architect just nudges things a little bit and then life moves in. And I think that's the humility. I think these two observations that you have about the raw materials of architecture, time and space, they're there in that whole series of the evolution. Those diagrams are immensely beautiful and the sections match it.
But I would argue, excuse me interrupting, but I would argue, say, someone like Carlo Scarpa's work is very much a work of architecture, but it's very porous and inclusive.
Yeah, but I think we're talking the same kind of game, in that you craft something in such a way that you can stand back and allow it to be used and interpreted.
Absolutely.
And so to my mind, the single most important line in your presentation was, "So the tree grows." Like, you've done something, you've facilitated something, and then it goes up to its own devices, and it makes another kind of architecture of which you don't have any control but responsibility. So very well done.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, well done, guys. Thank you.
There's a fantastic temple in Kyoto, Southport Station.
Yeah.
It's great enclosed area.
Yeah.
And it's really the balance